Good afternoon, my beautiful babes and babettes. I am your resident active advocate, and I would like to talk to you today about Big Hero 6. It was the first time I had ever seen it, just this morning, and it's a giant, ugly, cuddly marshmallow of love! Oh my god! The movie itself is kind of iffy. I think personally it's too fast paced for the story it's trying to tell. The whole issue with this movie is okay. The main character hero, he doesn't actually watch his big brother die, but his big brother dies in a fire trying to save someone else. And that's a very heroic thing to do, of course. And his older brother was a robotics genius, and Hiro himself is also a robotics genius. And the two of them are just so amazingly good at science, but this world is also so very futuristic that it facilitates those kinds of skills. And a lot of people in the movie have those skills, or the majority of people that you focus on in this movie have those skills. So before he died, Tadashi, the older brother, had been working on a robot named Baymax, who is your healthcare companion, I believe he calls himself. And his whole function is to assess a person's physical state of well-being, and assess how he can help them, with with their health. Basically, he's a big, giant, cuddly, marshmallowy nurse slash doctor. He can do this scanning function where he'll go through your whole body and be like, okay, your temperature is too low, or your heart rate is too high, or you need to eat, or you need to sleep. Those sorts of basic things that you can kind of figure out for yourself. But a lot of the time, people don't recognize when they are having physical symptoms, especially of a thing like stress. A lot of what this movie is about actually is learning how to control one's physical functions well under stress or in a state of despair, of heartbreak, as Hiro, our main character, feels after his brother dies. So Tadashi and Hiro are what literature calls mirror characters. I did not figure this out. This did not hit me until the last maybe 10 minutes of the movie. But they are mirrors to one another. Tadashi builds robots in order to help people. Hiro builds robots in order to fight with other robots, at least at the beginning of the movie. Robot fighting is actually illegal, but Hiro tries to skirt around this by saying, no, it's not illegal. It's illegal to bet on robot fighting. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just making money from it because I am a robotics whiz, and I am able to make these little nanobots that can group together into a bigger robot and, do huge feats of fighting. And basically, Hiro gets a scholarship at the age of 14 to the college that Tadashi attends by demonstrating this nanotechnology. And it's not just for fighting, though. When all of the nanobots that he creates come together, they can do a whole bunch of different things. They can facilitate transport, they can facilitate healthcare, they can facilitate basically all of a person's functional physical needs. And they are controlled telepathically by the user, who is using a neurotransmitter to communicate mentally with these robots. This technology, even for that time period and even for that setting, is absolutely revolutionary. And Hiro gets a scholarship to Tadashi's college like that. Um, Immediately after that, pretty much, the fire happens that in which Tadashi dies trying to save his professor, his favorite professor. And the whole problem with that is that Hiro doesn't exactly give up on his scholarship, but he's sort of torn about whether to attend or not because he's definitely in a state of depression at this point. He was very close with his brother. One thing that Disney can do really, really well, other than the damsel in distress, which thankfully they're getting away from in modern times. Thank you, Disney. One thing that Disney does really, really well is sibling relationships. And you see this with Lilo and Stitch. You see this with Big Hero 6. You see this in Mary Poppins. I haven't actually talked about this movie because I've been focusing more on the animated stuff. But I could go back and do some of the live action stuff if y'all want. But upon losing Tadashi, Hiro falls into depression, and he's not aware at this point that Baymax, the health robot, is still functional. And Baymax kind of comes to life again after Tadashi dies and tries to take care of Hiro, who sort of tries to push Baymax away, even though it's a ugly, cuddly marshmallow. Um, I really like Baymax. Okay, he's adorable. He's like the perfect character. But when Hiro finally warms up to to Baymax, there we go. Um, brain fart. When he warms up to him, he also turns Baymax into Hiro's own image of what Baymax ought to be, rather than this healthcare robot who facilitates the well-being of others. Hiro seeks to transform Baymax into a fighting robot, or one that can enable other people to fight as well. And that's where the name of the movie comes from, Big Hero 6, because Tadashi had a bunch of friends in his, as Hiro calls it, nerd lab, who were also incredibly skilled at different forms of robotics, of AI, of nanotechnology, and they join into basically a superhero league to go and find the guy who started the fire, because Hiro puts two and two together. It's like, immediately after my presentation about the nanobots, this fire was started, and the bulk of my nanobots went missing. He had one left, but he thought that the rest of them had been damaged to the point of destruction, but the little one that he keeps under his bed keeps going off, because the way his nanobots work is that they react to one another's presence. When another nanobot is near, one will start going beep beep, trying to squirm to get out of wherever it is to join up with its brother. So Hiro realizes that this is going on and that his other nanobots must still be functional somewhere. So he goes to the scene of where the fire happened, and he finds the guy using his mask, in which he had the neurotransmitter at the back to control these bots. He finds the guy who he suspects is Tadashi's real killer, like the guy who started the fire. And he says to Tadashi's friends, or no, I'm sorry, they come by him and they say to him, "Hey, what's going on?" They're all actually really good friends, even despite the age difference, because these guys are probably in their late teens, whereas Hiro is in his early teens, but again, child prodigy. And another thing this movie does really well is that it facilitates friendships between people with an equal amount of interest in the same thing, rather than being like, "Oh, you are our best friend's little brother, we can't hang out with you, you're not part of our group." They welcome him in with open arms, and even Baymax is the one to first say, this sort of ailment, your depression, can be healed by contact with others, can be healed by warm hugs. He's basically Olaf in marshmallow form, and I love it. But Tadashi's friends find out that Tadashi had potentially been murdered, and they say to Hiro, "Okay, yeah, we'll go after this guy who just tried to assault you as well, by the way, and we will help you track him down." They say, "We will help you track him down." They never said that murder was part of this plan, but when Hiro finds out who killed Tadashi, finds out who's under the mask, he says to Baymax, who by this point has been made into a fighting robot, kill him, eliminate him. And that goes against Baymax's fundamental function, which is never to harm a human life. That, by the way, even now is part of the Hippocratic Oath. I don't know if it is the entire Hippocratic Oath, but it's the oath that you take when you become a doctor or a nurse or a healthcare practitioner, basically of any kind, is to do no harm, to maximize good and to minimize harm to your patient. These are among the fundamental physical virtues of healthcare. And Baymax is programmed with the same constraints. He cannot harm another human life. And Hero tries to remove and does remove Baymax's basically his soul. It's not the unit that makes him functional, it's the unit that makes him benign, benevolent. And he removes that from Baymax, who then attempts to go on a massive killing spree until another person in the group puts the heart back in to his hard drive. And, Baymax is like, I regret any suffering that I may have caused, because he's a giant marshmallow robot. And that is actually how he talks. But Hero, this is the part I don't like, especially about this movie. Hero is still out for blood, but then he realizes that this is the opposite of what Tadashi had ever intended to use technology for. As I said earlier, Hiro and Tadashi are mirrors to one another. Hiro initially used technology to do harm, not to other people, but just to other robots for the sake of his own glorification. Whereas Tadashi used the technology that he built to help other people and didn't seek glory through it. So, what I don't like about this movie is that Hiro's turnaround to become more like his brother happens like that. Basically, Baymax says to him, "Is this what Tadashi would have wanted?" And Hiro's like, "No, no, it's not. And I have to stop. We're going to apprehend this guy. We're not going to kill this guy." And that, I don't think, is fundamentally how mental health works, unfortunately. Like, people can definitely change and become less bitter, maybe, about a loss that they have suffered, especially if it happened at the hands of another person, like intentionally or otherwise. People can turn around and, forgive that person, but it doesn't happen in the blink of an eye. Personally, I would not argue, I am a rigid pacifist. I would not argue that one should take out their negative emotions on another human being, regardless of whether that human being was the cause of your suffering. And this is why I don't agree with the death penalty or, anything like that. But at the same time, I also understand that it is a very basic, that by which I mean fundamental, sort of human instinct to want retribution of some kind, right? And in the movie, in his change of heart, Hero puts aside his need for revenge, for retribution, and, as I say, pretty much instantaneously just takes on Tadashi's spirit and says, no, that's not what we're here for. We're here to help other people. That's what technology should do. I agree. Yes, that is what technology should do. That is what other people should do for one another. Shut up, phone. Thank you. But I don't agree that that can happen in the blink of an eye. Even if you are in a very stressful situation, potentially a life or death situation, and you have to make decisions very quickly, people tend to act rashly, which is why Hero went after this person to begin with. It was just like, I'm going to honor my brother's memory through getting revenge, which was never what Tadashi would have wanted, okay? But Hiro can't see that from the very beginning because, oh, Baymax even says, I detect elevated neurotransmitters that indicate you are going through puberty. You know, he's 14 years old, okay? He's young and he's brash and he's a genius, but he's stupid when it comes to certain things. Like, I don't know how high his level of emotional intelligence is. And what I'm arguing is that that switch can't just be flipped like that. And, you suddenly turn from, I want to avenge my brother's death, to, I'm going to honor my brother's memory in the way my brother would have wanted. So I also really don't like how this movie ends. It's very sweet, but it's also very predictable, but it's also really, really sad. I'm not going to spoil the ending for you because I think the plot of this movie, the actual plot of this movie, is kind of thin. The whole reason why Tadashi's killer had done, did what he did was for a completely unrelated reason. And, Tadashi just kind of got caught in the crossfire of these two men going at it for, as I say, entirely unrelated reasons. There was no reason for anyone to have to lose their life over what happened. And actually, I will say one thing. There was, before the events of this movie, there was a failed experiment that occurred where the villain's daughter got lost in this sort of dimensional loop. It's a matter transmitter, okay? You've seen them on Star Trek. You go in one end of the portal, you come out the other end of the portal. This was the technology they were trying to create in this world, but it went wrong. And the villain blames this one guy he's trying to get revenge on, but it turns out it wasn't that guy's fault, it was the other guy's fault. And it's shaky, it's thin, and it's convoluted. And that's the one thing I really don't like this movie for, was its pacing and kind of its lack of story. It has character depth, but it doesn't have story depth. And I think for a really good movie, for a really good story, you need both, which was why yesterday I was waxing poetic all about Frozen, because not only does it have character depth, but it also has depth of plot. And I appreciate both. I am a character driven story person, okay? That's sort of my MO. But you need a stable enough plot to be able to hold your characters up. If your characters don't have, reasonable motivations because of the plot, then the characters themselves are going to fall flat. But the aspect of this movie that has to do with the mental health struggles of losing a loved one, that is definitely applicable to the real world. And like I say, change in that realm cannot happen overnight. It's just not realistic. And that's where I fault this movie, really, is for lack of realism in that regard, especially since it is this movie's main narrative. And that's pretty much, unfortunately, all I have to say about this movie. It may have been fortuitous for me to have watched this more than once, but I tend to like going with my gut reaction rather than, sitting down and analyzing the thing for too long. I mean, Frozen I had seen several times. Big Hero 6 I only just saw for the first time this morning. But yeah, pretty much that's Big Hero 6. It's not a very long movie, and as I say, I don't think it was especially well thought out. It's a little thin, but I love Baymax because he is a giant huggable marshmallow. Ah, love! Alright, so that is Big Hero 6, and I will have a new movie analysis for you on Monday. Not sure what we're doing, but I will look at my list, but I take weekends off. So I'll see y'all in 2 days. And have a lovely, wonderful weekend. Hopefully it's nice where you are. It's sunny, but it's windy AF where I am. Holy, right? All right. So have a lovely, wonderful day, and I will see y'all on Monday. Mwah!